Revive FM, or its management.
Good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday night. You're here with Arusa on Late Night Debate Nights, only on Revive FM 94.0. With me, I have my co-host, Hani Ali. She's also an Arabic grammar and morphology student. How are you, Hani? How's your Ramadan been?
Alhamdulillah, happy to be here. I think this Ramadan's been a lot better than expected. Especially this year, considering the whole situation and being out and about less and at home more, it made me make the most out of this Ramadan.
Oh yeah, definitely got to agree with you on that one. So the hot topic for tonight:
misogyny. Should it be a hate crime?
Should it be a hate crime? So the proposal to make misogyny a hate crime. Sorry about that. Sorry, we're having technical difficulties. Give me just 1 second. Yeah, sorry. So the hot topic for tonight, I don't know if you guys heard my co-host.
Misogyny. Should it be a hate crime?
Should it be a hate crime? So the proposal to make misogyny a hate crime has re-emerged in light of the recent unfortunate situation with Sarah Everard.
Sarah Everard's death brought about a global outcry for those in political spheres to do more to tackle the prejudice and injustice against women.
So joining us tonight, we have the Honourable Daniel Winterfeld, QC.
And Shaynul Kassim, a commercial and corporate lawyer who founded Fortune Law.
Hello, Daniel. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you, Marissa and Hani?
We're good, thank you.
Doing good, thank you.
I heard you had a really long day today.
I have had a long day, but it continues. It continues with a great conversation about a really important topic. So it's great to be here.
It continues. Thank you for joining us. And Shaynul, did you have a good bank holiday weekend?
Yes, I have 2 young boys, so weekends are always very hectic, trying to keep everybody happy and active.
Yeah, thank you for joining us at such a late hour tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So getting right into it, Shaynul, can I just ask you, what are your views? Do you think misogyny should be classified as a hate crime?
You know, it's interesting because when you first posed the question, I had to stop and take stock of this. Daniel, we're both corporate lawyers. This is a very sort of criminal angle to this, and so it's important to really consider the consequences and the outcomes of the change in legislation. The first thing is it is happening. So the government has put this in motion, even, it's for a temporary period at the moment to see how it pans out. So following, Nottingham police force and 10 other police forces after that. So it's in place at the minute. So it's not really a question of should it or will it, it is. And let's see what the outcome is. Now, in terms of my own personal views about this, I think I can see both sides of the argument, but I stand in favor of it actually becoming a hate crime. Yes.
And Daniel, can I just quickly, before we get really into it, can I just get your views, especially as a male lawyer working in Britain? What is your view?
Well, I am a corporate lawyer by day, but by night I run the Interlaw Diversity Forum. So I founded that 13 years ago. We started as an LGBT plus interorganizational network, but over time we've expanded to be intersectional. We have a race and ethnicity network, which is now 4 years old, a women's network, and also a disability network. And we have a focus on intersectionality, allyship, and social mobility. Interlaw is now 8,500 members and supporters from over 800 organizations. So I do spend a lot of time thinking about this space, not as much, as Shaynul said, not from the criminal side, but from thinking about it from the equality and diversity side. And when I look at the Equalities Act and think that we have protected characteristics, and the interesting thing about most of the protected categories is there are disadvantaged groups that are minorities. But when you think about women are actually a majority group that are disadvantaged. So when I look at, the term hate crime, which is used to describe criminal behavior where the perpetrator is motivated by hostility or demonstrates hostility towards the victim's disability, race, religion, sexual orientation, or transgender identity. And I say, well, why should women not be in that category? When you look at statistics and when you look at domestic violence and gender-based violence, it's an epidemic, not just in the United Kingdom, but globally. There are, huge amounts of charities. I did an event last year raising awareness. So to me, if I were to be asked, should this be extended? Should this temporary law that's been passed, that's being trialed, be made permanent? I would say absolutely. I think whenever there's a crime, I don't see why this should be treated differently than any other disadvantaged group. And I think that it's overdue. And maybe this is one of the answers as to why women haven't achieved the full equality that they have in the books.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to commend you on the work that you're doing in terms of diversity. It's apparent that, especially as lawyers, you could argue that maybe 20, 30 years ago, even the bar was made up predominantly of middle-aged white men. But I'm sure you could testify to the fact that it isn't like that anymore. It is a lot more diverse. And I would like to commend you on the work that you're doing in terms of diversity. But also, I'd like to argue in terms of the fact that, this isn't a new issue. The fact that it's that we're talking about misogyny being a hate crime isn't new. It might be a lot of people might not have heard about it before, because obviously after Sarah Everard, there was a global outcry. Like you said, it's a global issue. I think almost every single woman has experienced misogyny in some form or another. But it came to light in, I think, probably 2015 and then 2018 again. In terms of making a law, I think more could be done about it as well, in, like, for instance, educating, especially from primary school ages, not just adult. What would you say about that? Because I know you guys, both of you, are for making it a permanent law. Shanul, can I ask your view on this?
Yeah, so it's not really, there are arguments for, against, and the types of arguments that are made for, against this is that it's not going to be a silver bullet. It is not a solution. Making something a criminal offence doesn't actually solve the problem, particularly when you look at the statistics, in terms of violence against women and rape, for example, where the vast majority of cases aren't brought and aren't prosecuted. So what people are saying is that, well, if women are uncomfortable going to the police about something that is potentially, it's a violent act against women, a rape, and not just women, but we're talking about that at the minute. But if women are uncomfortable about taking that, then is this going to make it any easier for women? If these cases, because hate crime cases are difficult to prosecute, if they are not going to be taken and they're not actually going to result in a conviction, is it going to make it harder for women to be taken seriously? So these are the types of arguments that are being made against it. But what we're really talking about is, why is that happening? Why do women feel uncomfortable? Why do women feel that they are not heard? Why do women believe that the police won't take them seriously? So it's that whole piece about education, as you said, about starting early. We have lots of conversations about rape and violence, violence against women, but rape is not always necessarily a violent thing. In many cases, it's a question of consent. And I think if you don't educate both sexes, particularly, and I'm the mother of 2 boys, so I feel a deep sense of responsibility about this in any event, is that you've got to be able to have those conversations. And I think that's what's so important about this moment in time, is that we are having those conversations, and that's why we need to keep this door open.
I don't know if you, it's completely down to you, but I don't know if you'd like to share if you've ever experienced it, and if you'd like to share your view. My co-host, because she's pretty young, as a student, as a young British girl who wears the hijab, what's your view as, you wear the hijab, you're a female.
Firstly,
I don't know if you can butt in there.
Yeah, there's a few things I want to to like just chuck in there. Firstly, starting off with the idea that how you started off talking about how has been progress since in the past, like we had majority middle-aged white men in like certain sectors, and there has been progress, but it's not to say that there's still a lot more that can be done, is what is the main problem here. There's still so many issues surrounding misogyny and all this stuff. And even going on to a second point that Shaynor mentioned, I think it's also the fact about why women shy away, and it's what issues exactly become concerning to and become classified as a hate crime. So for example, you give the example of rape. Of course, that's more towards the more like
extreme,
more
extreme end of it. Yeah,
but there's other issues as well, like when you're at the bus, and there's been issues especially with young girls where guys, like, not to go too much into detail, but I think you guys get the point. Girls feel shy to even go openly talk about that, because they'll think that it's so small and so like insignificant. And it's this idea about, exactly as Shaynor mentioned, what is considered to be what is considered that someone will take me serious if I say this. So I think by making misogyny a hate crime shows that, okay, look, this is a concern in society, and we're dealing with it, and we want to take it seriously. By putting that in place, I feel like that will make women more inclined to mention their issues, and even things that they consider to be minute, to be more open to mention them more confidently.
I think it also highlights the gravity of the act. But don't you think we all have a responsibility to change the way we behave in society? So for instance, like I mentioned before, I think schools have a responsibility to teach, to highlight this issue to their students, make them aware about it, teach them. But also in the workplace, I mean, we've still got issues like the gender pay gap, microaggressions at work. If a woman wants to speak out and be a boss woman, as you'd like to say, she'd be called bossy, or I don't want to swear, but you know, the B word, in cases like that. I don't know, Shaynor, if you've ever experienced that. I really hope you haven't, but I don't know if you've ever experienced that.
Oh yes, I mean, this is the most concerning thing about all of this is that my first reaction to when you posed this question to me was similar to what Daniel had said in the beginning when he talked about minorities and women being the majority. So for me, I was saying, oh well, you can understand hate crime is usually to do with minorities, so actually, well, if we turn this into a hate crime, it would be half the population. Now, how are we going to manage and police this? And actually, that's the problem of itself, that those who say that it shouldn't be talk about resources, and the police, the criminal justice system is under-resourced. We don't have the money for this. We're not really going to be able to prosecute these things. And they start talking about the difficulties of enforcement rather than the principle of whether or not this should be enforced. And so we have this concept of everyday sexism. And this is where the problem really arises, is that the infrastructure of our society begets this type of behavior, because we live in a patriarchal society where entitlement eventually begets violence against women. And so, I was one of the unfortunately, I was one of the first test cases for stalking offences in this country, because I was stalked for a number of years when I was in my teens, and so I've experienced firsthand all of the different emotions and the difficulties and the challenges of being a young person involved in the criminal justice system as a victim. And actually, the law firm that I was doing work experience at when I was 14, who then I carried on doing work experience at when I was in my teens, were the ones who picked this up and helped me through that process. But that was not a pleasant experience. I don't think about it very often, but it's this type of thing that we just allow to continue. Because it's just one of those things that happen if you're female, and you have to find a way to avoid it.
Yeah. Very quickly. So I know a lot of you guys, this might be a touchy subject for a lot of you. So if you do want to join in the conversation, please do watch us on Facebook Live and message us. We're also on YouTube Live right now. And if you want to call in and ask a question to our guests or give us your opinion and your view, share maybe your experience of misogyny, then please do call us on 0333 444 0940. That's 0333 444 0940. So Daniel, I mean, you're a seasoned lawyer, I would say. How would you say, have you noticed the difference from maybe the beginning of your career as opposed to now? Have you noticed a difference in misogyny or misogynistic experiences of women in your work line of work?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say, Shanul, I'm really sorry what you've been through. I think that's, I think that is a great example of you were in a really unfortunate position, but you were in a fortunate place where you were connected to a firm who was able to help and support you. I think the average person in the UK doesn't always have that help and support. And as you said, many women don't feel that they should go to the police. But I would encourage people to report crimes. If you've experienced something, you should go to the police. You should help them. They actually have dedicated teams that are experienced and that are dedicated to supporting and helping women in this space. So I think the experiences people might have had in the past are very different now, and the training and the responses you would get from the police are also quite different. So, going back to the solution, I mean, or my view, there's been huge shifts and changes in the past 20 years. I've been in the United Kingdom. Originally, I'm from the US. I moved here from New York in 2000. So this is my 21st year in London. I've seen massive shifts and changes, but we have a long, long way to go. If you look at the legal sector, you'll see that women are disadvantaged. We do studies within interlaw and career progression. We look at women's experiences. We look at everybody's experiences, and we look across all strands of diversity and inclusion and social mobility. And what we find is that women statistically earn less than their male counterparts and face more barriers. But with intersectionality, as you add on to gender, disability, LGBT plus, race, ethnicity, as you go out, women, those individuals and those women that are intersectional earn even less and face more barriers in the profession. So we know that we have a problem where one group does the best, everyone else is disadvantaged. And as a woman, the more diverse you are, the more disadvantaged you are. So it's very important to remember that we still have these issues and these challenges, and there is no silver bullet. So I think, our premise of making, misogyny and gender-based violence and other crimes, hate crimes, I think is a great proposition. But as we know, the law is the baseline. So according to the books, women have been paid equally for decades in the United Kingdom and the United States, and we continue to generate gender pay gap reports, and we fall far short of those expectations. I think we need to, as you said, address education to bring about real social change. Education is super important. Within workplaces, we need to be doing leadership training, inclusive leadership training, unconscious bias training, but holistically looking at our cultures. If our research tells us that one group is advantaged and everyone else is disadvantaged, we need to reconstruct our cultures and our systems and re-examine what meritocracy is, how we recruit, how we retain, and how we promote talent. We have a lot of work to do systemically to bring about sustainable long-term change, but it's something that we can do. And whatever changes we unlock for women, we will unlock for other groups, because those same barriers that are there are impacting people from all disadvantaged groups.
I think it's important that we do highlight when we are privileged. Just very quickly, we're going to delve deeper into this issue. We'll go on a quick break. Don't forget, you can call us on 0333 444 0940. Join in the conversation. Message us on Facebook Live. We will be reading out your comments. But go grab a cup of tea and come back and join us right after the break.
This is Aisha. Her father died in an accident at a very young age. She lives with her mother and siblings. There are millions like Aisha who do not have access to the very basics of life, resulting in her and many others not being able to attend school. Through Minhaj Welfare Foundation, your charity is dedicated towards supporting the full needs of orphans and needy children around the world. Donate today. Call us now 0300 30 30 777 or visit us on minhajwelfare.org.
अब हर कोई हफ्ते में 2 बार मुफ्त कोविड-19 टेस्ट कर सकता है। आधे घंटे के अंदर नताइज आपके सामने। इससे ये पता चलता है कि आप अपने प्यारों की हिफाजत के लिए जो कर सकते हैं वो कर रहे हैं। आपके दोस्त, आपके साथ काम करने वाले साथी और आपकी जिंदगी में फिर से आगे बढ़ने की ख्वाहिश। अंदाजन 3 में से 1 शख्स ऐसा है जिसमें बज़ाहिर कोविड-19 की कोई अलामत दिखाई नहीं देती, मगर अनजाने में वो उसे फैला रहा है। वो आपका कोई दोस्त, रिश्तेदार, काम का साथी या आप खुद भी हो सकते हैं। रैपिड टेस्ट बहुत आसानी से nhs.uk/get-tested से मिल सकते हैं। आइए ये अगला कदम बहुत मोहतात होकर उठाएं।
Waris Food Store, the place to go for all your meat and groceries. We stock thousands of items from fresh fruit and veg to all your favourite Ramadan food products. Based at 420 Hoe Street in Walthamstow, we can deliver anything you need right to your doorstep. Just give us a call on 0208 521 0000 and take advantage of our huge Ramadan offers. Waris Food Stores is now also available on Uber Eats.
Revive FM
94.0 on the radio,
on your mobile,
and online.
If you want to advertise your business
Thinking
on
about
Revive
selling or
FM,
letting your home? With Maxwell Estates, you don't need to look any further. Well established with over 15 years of experience, Maxwell Estates are specialists in residential sales and lettings. We manage over 200 properties in and around Northwest London, keeping our landlords and tenants updated with all the latest laws and legislations. Based in Edgware, our experienced
We're back after the break, talking about misogyny. If you guys want to join in the conversation, don't forget you can call us on 0333 444 0940. That's 0333 444 0940. If you don't want to speak on the radio, you can also send us a message on Facebook Live or YouTube Live and join in the conversation. Share your experiences, share your views on what you think about misogyny. I'm sure we all have something to say.
Yeah, also like elaborating on what Daniel mentioned before, there is this idea of women having the idea of a glass ceiling in the workplace, and there's only so much to a certain extent at which certain women can progress in the workplace. And going back to what Shaynor mentioned as well, I wanted to, you slightly touched upon this idea, and to play devil's advocate as well, there's the other side of the argument, and it's the argument that like classifying misogyny as a hate crime increases bureaucracy, and like this increases the pressure on the police force and its time and effort which they could utilize into more pressing issues. Not to say I agree with this, but there is this side of the argument, and arguing this as well brings about the idea that misogyny, so like how, to what degree do we even hold it important? What certain issues are more pressing, and it's this idea of balancing between the two and deciding which one's more important than the other. Yeah, so I think that even causes problems in society too.
I mean, you guys are lawyers. What would you say? There is, personally, my personal view is that it should be a permanent thing into the law. But yeah, because as Shaynor mentioned earlier on, even if you look at rape cases, the conviction rate is really, really low. So, I mean, how productive really is it? Turning it into an actual law, how productive is it? Because I feel like women are hesitant to come forward.
So from my point of view, I think that it would send a message, and I think it's an important message to be sending, because we're not going to get anywhere if we just say, well, society is made like this and it will take us time to work it out, and we have everyday sexism and people up in arms because they're like, oh, well, it's just a wolf whistle. We've had people from the police saying things like, well, you know, it's going to make it so difficult for men. They won't know what they're allowed to say anymore. And it's so complicated. And, you know, what that really is saying is that it's more important that men feel comfortable than that women don't feel discriminated against. And so it's basically turning the tables on behavior and conduct. And actually, when we were talking earlier about sending that message or making people take stock and actually consider their behavior, because there are criminal consequences attached to that, is more likely to have an impact than not having that at all. Daniel, do you agree?
Yes, you know, I agree 100%. I think deterrence is a big reason for this. I think it part of that education process and societal change is saying that this is not tolerated. And by having it classified as a, I mean, all these things are already illegal. It just becomes even more illegal. Also, the police, when it comes to hate crimes, has, you know, special procedures and enhanced procedures and protections for victims of hate crime. So women would be afforded those. That also may help with increase women's trust and their ability to come forward, you know, and report. So, you know, I mean, a few of the statistics about the number of people impacted, according to the Office of National Statistics, 7.9% of women suffered domestic violence in England and Wales. In 2018, that's 1,300,000 women. Every year, according to the crime survey for England and Wales, 85,000 women experience rape, attempted rape, or sexual assault in England and Wales alone. These are numbers of people. Over 400,000 women are sexually assaulted every year in England and Wales, according to the Home Office. So the statistics vary, but they're shocking numbers. And whatever we can do to deter that, to ensure that women who experience it report it, and that people take these crimes seriously, that leads to more prosecution, is incredibly important. And I could argue what better way could be using our resources. I think that an argument that oh, well, this would overwhelm. It's like, well, we already have this this epidemic of violence going on against women, and I think really it's who are we as a society if we don't think that we should be prioritizing this.
It would also provide further critical data on the link between hostility and the abuse and harassment that women do suffer. But looking at it in practice, how would the sentencing work? And I think people would argue, oh, I'm just going to interrupt there. I think we have a caller on the line. So let's see what they have to say very quickly. Hello, caller. You're live on Revive FM 94.0. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, my name's Baktava and I'm calling from Oxbridge.
And did you want to speak to one of the guests or share your view on the topic?
I would like to speak to Akila and share my view on the topic. I mean,
yeah.
Yep.
I mean, so yeah.
Is
so
it
what
Akila?
did you? Arusa, yeah.
Arusa, sorry. Hey.
Yeah. What did you want to say?
Oh, well, it's a very interesting topic. My point of view on this is a bit cultural.
Mm-hmm,
so where I'm from, where I'm British Pakistani, so it's more of an Asian aspect of the point of view that I want to come across with.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, I think it's this misogynistic view. It's more of a tautology in terms of, I think we are brought up like that. It's psychologically embedded within us. It's become so embedded that it's more now innate within us.
Yeah.
So, like in our culture, it's like, you know, well, I know it's changed, but if I was to say like the condition that I'm in or the way I am living, it's like men are born to be like taught that they are so much more superior than
women.
The women, and it's not just like it's just not like the fact that you know you've got sisters and you've got mothers, and you know you're going to treat them as, yeah, you know, these are my sisters, these are my mothers, and obviously we treat them with respect. But as soon as a man, I think from our culture, when they're married, once they're married, it becomes like, hey, now this woman that she was married to is now our property, and you know what we say she must obey, or if not, she's seen as someone who, disobeys, and she thought, oh no, she's already, causing problems because she's not agreeing with certain aspects. Like, for example, if she wants to move out from her in-laws, and she doesn't want to due to privacy, or due to other problems. Maybe the relationship within the in-laws is toxic, and so she wants to move out.
I think you're focusing more on the like cultural aspect, and it is. That's
exactly what I said. That's exactly what I said. My point of view on this. There's so many aspects to this. So many aspects to misogyny. Like, for example, I was reading an article where this woman, she was arguing that she had a road rage with a young male driver who, kind of had a go at her. And then when she came home, she told her husband, she said, look, if I was a male, it would have been a different story. He wouldn't have, had the rage that he had with her. So she was, in the article, she was just saying that I think it's just embedded within us.
Embedded within our culture, yeah. We can definitely, thank you for calling. I think I want to ask Shinal, what's your, what do you think? Do you think this is something that's innately been embedded in our mindset? I don't know if you guys saw, but there was a scientific study that said when they were looking at men, there's a part of our brain that recognizes people, and then there's another part of our brain that recognizes things. And when women are dressed in a certain way, in men is the part of the brain that recognizes things. When they looked at the woman dressed in a certain way, that's the part of the brain that they used. So I mean, like, scientifically, how do you go around that? Because we can make laws, but
well, I don't know the science behind that report, and I'm not going to. I don't really know whether I want to. It sort of smacks of that whataboutism. You come up with a topic and you express the issue, and somebody else says, "Well, what about this?" And they just distract from the actual, subject at hand. Really, going back to your caller, she was talking about everyday sexism to a degree. Women can't drive, women are terrible referees, etc., etc. Equally, at the same time, that anger or that rage that she felt, well, then that's a sign of misogyny. And I think sometimes people get confused between sexism and misogyny. And they use them interchangeably, which it makes it difficult. And you were asking about, well, if people are biologically made a particular way, then how are we going to implement legislation which makes them behave another way? Well, we could come up with all kinds of we're rational beings, and we're able to think rationally. And I think that we have to make these changes. And I agree with your caller that there is a cultural issue, and there is a cultural issue in Asian culture, in this whole sort of concept of the prince, and the subordination of women, sort of across the centuries. We only had to hear very, very tragically a couple of days ago about that young woman who was killed in Pakistan.
And Zulfikar, I think it's her name. Right.
Thank you for saying her name. And it just literally, that was just a day or so ago, and it just brings it all back again. You think about the concept of honor killing, because people don't call it murder, they call it an honor killing. And it doesn't really matter what the law in Pakistan says. 20% of honor killings in the world take place in Pakistan, the most amount anywhere in the world. So if you start using terminology that diminishes the crime, it's not really a question of semantics. What we're doing is we're saying violence against women. We're not saying male violence against women. We're saying honor killing. We're not saying murder. And so I think, the more you read, the angrier I think you can become about this, really.
Yeah. So I don't know if everybody's heard, but there was a young woman shot, and unfortunately, I think she was strangled in Pakistan. A British law student who went to Pakistan on holiday. She didn't want to come back to the UK on account of having to pay the fee to quarantine in a hotel. She was having fun in Pakistan, so she thought, I'd rather just bide my time here. And unfortunately, she was killed because I think it's because two men were after her hand and she didn't agree. So they thought that they could just go ahead and take her life. She was a law student, she had so much going for her. And this is like a really unfortunate situation. And it's like you said, there are laws in Pakistan, but in practice, how productive really are they? I feel like we need to go down to the roots of the issue and educate men. It's like you said, if we start if there's terminology, specific type of terminology that we're using, call it murder instead of honor killing, then I think it would be more productive. Do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, there were a couple of things I was going to say. My mind's just gone blank. Sorry, could you repeat the last point that you said?
Oh, we can come back to you. That's perfectly fine. Daniel, I don't know if you want to jump in there because I think
sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, I think is it more extreme in certain cultures, maybe in like within the BAME community, maybe it's more prominent in certain cultures as opposed to it being in the West?
Look, I think it's really important to recognize, I think one of the successes of places like the United Kingdom and the United States is our ability to be a cultural melting pot, and that diversity is our strength. So people come from different cultures and different backgrounds, but I think we all share a common legal framework, and we have to share common values. So I think that we have to respect tradition and respect people's right to have different religions and cultures and beliefs, but those end at other people's civil rights. So when it comes to people's health and well-being and their safety and their civil rights, that trumps other people's beliefs and activities. So I do think you can make those two things meld together, but I think it's important that we work to outreach to communities to make sure that that people are supporting women, supporting other disadvantaged groups, understanding the difficulties and complexities. I think it's one of the challenges in society, but I think it's what makes one of the great strengths. You look at London. London is 40% Black, Asian, and minority ethnic, which is an incredibly diverse city, and that diversity and that richness of culture is a strength. And I think we can build on that and make sure that we work with different communities, both with different cultural backgrounds and different backgrounds of faith, to push and champion women and other groups. So I don't think the two things are necessarily against each other, but I think it's a matter of learning to help people reconcile them. And I think also empowering young women to have their voice and find their voice and their strength is incredibly important for all of us.
Yeah, perfectly said. And that point perfectly, it helped me remember my point I was going to say as well. I think it's also key to differentiate and highlight the difference between culture and religion. Most of these situations and cases we hear, especially the issue of Pakistan, I think it's not a problem that stems from religion, but more from culture. If anything, in my opinion, I know me as a Muslim, Islam, from what I've learned, Islam in fact liberates women, teaches us about the rights of women, and all these things. And it's instead of the religious side, it's more of the cultural side and what how parents or your household brings you up and the things that you learn. And it might not be even that they speak to you and actually teach you those things, more than the fact that what you observe and the behaviors around you. For example, the smallest things making the girl wash all the dishes and everything instead of the boy. And it's these little microaggressions as well in the way we speak to women, and these small subtle things. I think that all, once they've accumulated, shape these things, and these things which are reflected and then echoed into society. And by even creating and putting this label as misogyny a hate crime, I think it would have a trickle-down effect, and that can then be reflected into the educational institutes and teach students more about that, and then in households too. So all of this interlinks, and by putting it as a hate crime, it would have lots of benefits onto
I
like
think
everything.
yeah, I think when we're looking at the law, I think it's definitely a starting point, but I will definitely focus on the more educational aspect. I mean, myself, if you look at racism, it was such a prominent issue just a while back, and it still is, but it was highlighted more so in the media just a while ago. And as a young British person who was born and brought up in London, right from the get-go, right from primary school, we got taught about all different religions. When you're looking at racism, we get taught about different religions. You learn to appreciate different cultures and different religions. And I feel like because of that beginning in primary school, I've now grown up to be more aware and more tolerant and more accepting. So I think we need to start doing that for girls and boys, and looking at sex issues like sexism and gender and misogyny from the get-go, right from primary school. If we begin teaching young children, I think that's how it's going to obviously have an impact on how it shapes our society. Would you not agree?
Yeah. Also, another example came to mind about the fact that these little subtle things that we taught from a very young age, which then get reflected onto when we're older and when we're in society as well. And I don't know, there's these preconceived ideas that are surrounded by women, which end up having such a big effect on how like men see us. One of the things I experience quite a bit is this idea that women are like, we're not intellectually capable, our cognitive abilities are much lower and much inferior to men. And the fact that I've noticed this already, like in university or like in school or stuff, when a girl speaks out, it's almost as if, oh wow, like I didn't know you could do that. And it's these little things that end up getting reflected, and you just think about that in university or college or the education, whatever your educational institute, and it's these exact ideas that then get projected into the workplace. And it's like the examples you were saying about if a woman then speaks out, she gets these ideas attached to her, like she's the B word for speaking out, being too confident, or she's boisterous, or she's aggressive, and it's all these things. So it's key to teach children from a young age, because all these things add up and it leads one thing to another. And then it starts off with something small, and I think it all builds up and it becomes more pressing concerns.
Yeah, before we go on a break, Shinal and Daniel, do you wanna butt in there, and or we can go?
I think that, you make some very, very good points about, what the messaging you receive at home. It takes a lot of courage, to go out into the world if you don't have that infrastructure at home that supports you and your ideas and your identity. And it's, sometimes it takes a very long time to undo that messaging. And I think that's why, even though it's very frustrating for me to be constantly looking at this, when you see this and you think, God, I don't want to be the vulnerable one. My gender is strong. I don't want these provisions being written into law for me to protect me. Why should I require these protections? But equally, that's the reality.
Yeah, it's like, how we talk about prevention is better than cure. You're right. It's difficult to undo something that you've learned. That's more difficult than, just looking at the issue right from the roots. We'll go on a quick break, and we'll be back. If you guys want to call in, our number is 0333 444 0940. Note it down and call us right after the break, or talk to us via Facebook Live and YouTube Live. So you're listening to us on Revive FM 94.0, and we'll be back right after the break.
Taj Grill invites you to the world of Pakistani cuisine. With every dish prepared to perfection, why not try our sizzling mixed grill, our famous masala fish, or choose from our selection of freshly made curries and allow the Taj Grill experience to speak for itself. Visit us at 72 Ilford Lane or 508 Ilford High Road, or call 0208 262 6476. We also offer catering for all your events. Call us for more information.
ये आयशा है। ये बहुत छोटी सी थी जब इसके वालिद का एक हादसे में इंतकाल हो गया। वो अपनी माँ और छोटे बहन भाइयों के साथ रहती है। आयशा जैसी लाखों बच्चियां जिंदगी की बुनियादी सहूलतों से बिल्कुल महरूम है। यही वजह है कि वो स्कूल भी नहीं जा सकती। मिनहाज वेलफेयर फाउंडेशन ने आपकी एहतियात और अपनी खिदमत दुनिया भर के यतीम और बेसहारा बच्चों के लिए वक्फ कर दी है। एक यतीम और बेसहारा बच्चे का सहारा बनिए। आज ही अतिया कीजिए।
अभी कॉल मिलाएं 0300 3030 या हमारी वेबसाइट विजिट करें www.minhajwelfare.org.
Let's connect with the Holy Quran. Minhaj Dawah Project distributes the Holy Quran in plain simple English for free. You can donate £3 and sponsor a Quran to a loved one, a neighbour, a colleague or a friend. We distribute Qurans totally free of charge across the whole UK, including in prisons. Please call us now to contribute on 0300 030 1951 or email us on dawah@minhajuk.org.
Now we're gradually coming out of lockdown. We can meet up outside in groups of up to 6 or 2 households. Have friends round for a drink in the garden. There you are, doing your bit, keeping a safe distance. When it starts to get dark and a little chilly, and suddenly your lounge looks very warm and inviting. But don't forget, you're much safer in the fresh air because COVID-19 particles are blown away. Let's take this next step safely. Remember, hands, face, space and fresh air.
अब हर कोई हफ्ते में 2 बार मुफ्त कोविड-19 टेस्ट कर सकता है। आधे घंटे के अंदर नताइज आपके सामने। इससे ये पता चलता है कि आप अपने प्यारों की हिफाजत के लिए जो कर सकते हैं वो कर रहे हैं। आपके दोस्त, आपके साथ काम करने वाले साथी और आपकी जिंदगी में फिर से आगे बढ़ने की ख्वाहिश। अंदाजन 3 में से 1 शख्स ऐसा है जिसमें बज़ाहिर कोविड-19 की कोई अलामत दिखाई नहीं देती, मगर अनजाने में वो उसे फैला रहा है। वो आपका कोई दोस्त, रिश्तेदार, काम का साथी या आप खुद भी हो सकते हैं। रैपिड टेस्ट बहुत आसानी से nhs.uk/get-tested से मिल सकते हैं। आइए ये अगला कदम बहुत मोहतात होकर उठाएं।
Revive FM
94.0 on the radio,
on your mobile,
and online.
Hello and welcome back. You're listening to us on Revive FM 94.0 and we're talking about misogyny today. If you want to call in, our number is 0333 444 0940. That's 0333 444 0940. Or you can join us and comment on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. We're seeing your comments. We'll be reading them out. We've had to say goodbye to Daniel. I know he had a really long day today and he has an early start tomorrow. So Daniel, if you're listening, I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight at such a late hour too, and thank you for your input. So we'll just quickly read out some of the comments. It's nice to see some of the men commenting as well. So we've got Hasnan Hussein is saying it's difficult to answer. People are entitled to believe whatever they want, even if they have bigoted views. However, they shouldn't be allowed to express misogyny in public or harm women in any way. He also said, I think if misogyny is not considered a hate crime, then it will continue to be accepted by many groups in society, definitely. We've got Ikra Namal saying upbringing and education plays a key role. And some more men commenting. So we've got Mr. Moz Rafiq saying, agree, education is really important as this is embedded and a lot of work needs to be done. What do the panel suggest? So we can ask Shainul that question. And we've got Mr. Ismail Sethi saying, do you think modern day third wave feminism aids or hinders misogynistic attitudes? Please ask the female guests. So Shainul, do you want to answer that question? Do you think modern day third wave feminism aids or hinders misogynistic attitudes?
I think if people want to hold certain views, they're going to hold them regardless. And I think there are people who are going to use and leverage certain concepts to their own advantage. So you have individuals who say, I'm not a feminist. I don't believe in feminism. Feminism undermines the mandate of women because it basically turns this into an issue which is women against men. That's not what it does. But we've recently had all of that, haven't we, with people saying I don't feel like I should want to say that I'm a feminist anymore. You've had men saying I feel like I should say I'm a feminist. And so feminism has just started to become almost a dirty word, and that is people hijacking the actual agenda. So I think that whatever concept you're going to call it, somebody is going to want to argue the opposite of it and take it on its own terms.
Do you think there's this misconception about, we all know within the British Asian culture, or even other ethnic minorities, I think everybody is aware that misogyny and misogynistic attitudes do exist. But do you think, in terms of, we live in the West, we were born and brought up in the West, do you think there's this misconception that maybe it exists in cultures of ethnic minorities, maybe more so than in the West? Do you think we're in denial about it, maybe?
Well, we have a gender pay gap in this country. So that just answers that question. I think that there are cultures and there are societies where more work needs to be done. But I think that we are all struggling. The plight of women, wherever you are in the world, is still difficult. We are in the West. We live in London. We have access to education. We have access to healthcare. We have access to, 100 years ago, we had the Sexual Discrimination Act, the Disqualification Act. And, I wouldn't have been allowed to be a lawyer back then. And I am now. Having said that, we still have a gender pay gap. So, it's exhausting, isn't it, banging this gender equity drum?
Yeah, I feel like we've been talking about the gender pay gap for such a long time, and we're still stuck on the same issue. And there's loads of microaggressions that exist, not just in the workplace, but they exist in schools as well, like tone policing or mansplaining, things like that. But in terms of, if we want to talk about the cultural aspect of it, as a Muslim hijabi living in Britain, I think also not just for non-Muslims, but with Muslims as well, there's also this misconception that I think it exists more so with men, that misogynistic attitudes come from religion as opposed to culture. And I think we need to differentiate between that, because misogyny does not come from religion. It's culture brings it about. And like you were saying about feminism, arguably Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was the first feminist, you could argue, because pre-Islamic Arabia, you had issues like female infanticide, education. He empowered women to be educated as well. If we're looking at property, in America and Europe, women were denied the right to own property and manage property until as late as the 18th century. But Islam was the first religion to, give women rights of inheritance.
Yeah, and even the idea of inheritance is this. There's so many misconceptions when it comes to Islam as well. So, for example, the law of inheritance, you see the idea that a woman gets a third, whilst the guy gets 2/3, and everyone would look at that and they'll be like, "Oh my God, this injustice, this inequality, and all these things." When you actually look at it and study, you see the guy has to spend his entire 2/3 on his wife. What does she get to spend it on? Herself.
Yeah,
who's winning there then?
Yeah.
So it's these ideas, and I think it's these things that cause problems with culture too, because culturally people assume that, oh, my religion says this too, and they stem those ideas from religion, and they think, oh, my religion teaches me this, but they lack the education, so they'll see something and they'll automatically assume like it's injustice and all these things, but it's lack of education, I think.
Yeah. Shano, I don't know if you want to butt in there.
I think there's a couple of things here. I think one is that religion is a very personal thing. It's a very personal thing, but it's also, when you are attacking somebody, it's very easy and quite lazy to attack their faith, because it's such an obvious manifestation of who they are. So when we talk about culture and we talk about faith, people aren't necessarily aware of what culture, the sort of intricacies of culture and what that really means, right? So when somebody wants to, be rude to you or be aggressive or, throw hate at you, they're going to call you names which, are related to how you look. Yeah. And so that's a massive, area of laziness. I can't remember who it was. I think it was the one of the candidates for mayor, actually, who was saying something along the lines. This is in 2015, actually, some time back. But we've got the elections coming up, and people like to drag up all kinds of things, don't they? So he had said something along the lines of, we have all of this teaching of faith, in primary schools, and children learn more about a particular faith. And he said, they're learning about, he confused the words Hindu and Hindi, the language, right? Now, it's one of these things where we're living in a multicultural society, but people aren't really educated about really the sort of very large religions that there are in the world, right? And so there isn't enough education. So going back to your other caller's question, what does the panel think about how we're going to overcome these things? Well, we talk about education, and education is really important, but what are we actually doing about it? And that is why one of the proponents, Helen Kennedy, of this misogyny as a hate crime, is basically saying women are tired of listening to sympathy. Women want us to act now and show that there are consequences to things. Now, we had not so long ago, we had a lot of debate about female genital mutilation. And people were having the same thing. We can't turn that into a criminal offense. It's happening outside in a different culture. It's allowed in that culture. It's allowed in that country. How will we police it? But you have to send a message.
You do have to send a message. Yeah. I mean, if you go back to Islam, laid down the doctrine that dictates women's rights. So if we make that a permanent fixture within the legislation in England and Wales, it definitely does send a message. But I think also policies need to be put in place in terms of educating from a very young age within schools as well. And like in the workplace, you have, there are already, workshops. A lot of workplaces do workshops, but I think more needs to be done. Do you want to quickly say a closing statement?
Also, I think the fact that
what's your final view on the topic?
I think there needs to be a lot more done. We argue that there's been progression in terms of gender and equality and stuff and misogyny, but I think there's a whole lot more that can be done still, especially from the workplace and literally any sector that you think about. There's so much more that you can still be done, and I think it should start at home, and in educational institutes. But by making misogyny a hate crime will be the first step, which will help everything else fall into place, I feel as well.
Shaino, what are your closing statements?
My closing statement really is that this is a good step forward. I'm glad the government has, mandated this to take place in effect. I want to see what the outcomes are going to look like. They may not be the outcomes that we need as quickly as we need them, because this is a trial, but we need to give it the time and that it deserves. We're talking about, half the population, really.
Yeah, I think we're in the right direction. Everything takes time, but I think definitely when we're looking at it from legislation, we're going the right way and we're taking the right step. So thank you, Shaino, for joining us tonight. I loved hearing your views. Thank you so much. And guys, join us again next week. I think we have Saad and Mahi doing another episode of Late Night Debate Nights, and join us again next week for tonight. Good night and Allah Hafiz.
Now we're gradually coming out of lockdown.